All of my life, I have fostered a deep love for Halloween. Everything about it makes me tingle with joy and the expectation of a fun, spirited time. I mean, the weather is superb. The leaves of yellow, red, and brown are gorgeous. The decor inspires my infinite imagination. The treats are mouth-watering. The movies and shows leave me in a perpetual state of high anxiety. What's not to love? Within the last couple of years, I've been old enough to dress up for the holiday again. As a child, I, of course, slipped into a costume for the night. Then, as a preteen, it occurred to me that I was too old for such shenanigans, much like how it came to be that I was no longer old enough to play with Barbies and dolls. I recently dove into my mid-20s, right as my daughter, Olivia, entered her toddler years, and it dawned on me that I was finally able to, and it was acceptable of an age, to wear a costume again. In addition to this, there is nothing more fun than having your child pick out a costume and go trick-or-treating with them. I still love Halloween. I don't think anything could ever make me stop enjoying the night. However, I now approach Halloween like I'd approach a stranger in a dark alley, with caution. Olivia was 1.5. She dressed as a dragon that year and looked absolutely adorable. I know, I'm biased, but it's true. We trick-or-treated for about an hour before Sleepy Baby vocalized by way of tantrum that she'd have enough festivities for the night and was ready for bed. I'd worked all day, so I was a bit relieved that we could head home. The walk home was nice. The sky was a deep slate gray as it wasn't yet fully night. There was a cool breeze that carried to my ears the gleeful voices of children all throughout the neighborhood. At home, I bathed my cranky baby, slapped a fresh diaper and PJs on her, and tucked her in, planting a kiss on her forehead before leaving her to drift off into sleep. For myself, I changed out of my headless horseman attire, grabbed a beer, snagged a few chocolates out of Olivia's pumpkin bucket, and settled into the couch to watch a horror film on TV. I sipped on my beer, ate my stolen bounty, and cringed into the cushion at every jump scare. When the credits of the TV rolled, I turned the TV off and showered, and got ready for bed. I was getting myself some ice water when there was a knock at the front door. I checked the oven clock. 10:39. Trick-or-treating ended at 8, but I figured maybe some teenagers were just trying to stretch the night out a little bit, or perhaps just wanted to dabble in some practical jokes, like Ding Dong Ditch. I tiptoed to the door and peered through the peephole. A weeping girl, probably about 16 or so, stood on my welcome mat, mascara running down her face. She was dressed in an outfit that reminded me of Little Red Riding Hood. Oh, fuck. What's this about? I opened the door. Are you okay? What's going on?
You gotta let me in! Please, 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 Jesus, let me in! I'm so scared!
A stench of raw fear emanated from the girl. If she was playing a joke, she may have earned a fucking Academy Award. I instantly felt my stomach drop. I had Olivia sound asleep in her bed to worry about. Yeah, come on in, hurry, I said, letting her in and shutting the door while locking it behind her.
Oh, God, thank you, you have no idea. I've gone to a million different houses and no one would acknowledge me.
She peeled the red hood of her cloak off her head of long dark hair. What's going on? Are you hurt? Do you need me to call your parents or the cops or both?
No!
She shouted, throwing her hands up in the front of her, and I flinched. She lowered her arms to her side.
I mean, no, that's not necessary. I'm okay. Can I have a drink, please?
Yeah, but you're gonna tell me what's going on, right? She solemnly nodded, chewing on her bottom lip. After I'd given her a glass of water, we sat on my couch. She guzzled the water down and put the empty glass on the coffee table. I cleared my throat, because I didn't really want to be pushy, but I had to know the extent of the situation. I was with my friends. We weren't trick-or-treating or anything, just walking around and goofing off. There was this party we were going to go around to tonight. She twirled a strand of hair around her index finger. It's okay, really. I was trying my best to sound like a safe and comforting adult, when really I felt like a terrified, insecure little girl myself. I wished I wasn't having to deal with this. Wished that there was someone older around to take care of it. We went to the cemetery, took some candles and stuff for a seance. Everything was just fun, you know? We didn't mean for anything to really happen. My arms broke out into a goosebumps. I knew in the same way you can feel someone staring at you without even seeing them. In the same way that you know the teacher is about to call your name before she does. That whatever she was telling me was the truth. I squirmed in reluctance to receive it. I wanted my mom. At first, we thought it was a train because it sounded really far off. Then we thought that it was just the wind, but the trees weren't moving. And that's when the grave next to us crumbled. We all screamed and scattered. I ended up alone, running past grave after grave. Her voice was getting shrill and hysterical, tears rolling down her cheeks. I tripped over something, and when I stood up, there was like this woman standing in front of me. She was in a long black dress. God, there was like this terrible smell. She smelled like death. Her face, her eyes were completely white, and her mouth was open. She had all these teeth, like some kind of monster. But the worst part was the axe that was stuck in her neck, and her head was like crooked. It was like barely hanging on. She swallowed and closed her eyes, rubbing her arms. She touched me with these long, like, talons, fingers, or nails. I screamed and ran and tried to get someone to help me, and then you answered the door. I don't know where my friends are, but I'm so scared. Her pale face flushed suddenly. I was so scared that I wet myself. I was stunned. I had no idea how to react. The rational part of me said, "This girl's messing with you. You aren't fucking with me, are you?" "No!" she screamed. "I swear." I hate to ask this. You haven't been using drugs, have you? She shook her head. "I had 2 beers hours ago, that's it." I wet my lips with my suddenly heavy tongue. "And what about your friends? You don't think it's possible that they were playing jokes on you?" She started to stare off into space. "I hope they were." An impregnated silence followed before I shattered it as I got up and started for the hall. "Just hang on a sec. I'm gonna get my cell so you can call your parents, okay? And I think I have a pair of pants that you can fit into. Just breathe. You're perfectly safe now." She didn't answer me. She just kept staring at nothing. The goosebumps materialized again. On the way to my room, I checked on Olivia. She was sleeping peacefully, blissfully unaware of the situation in the living room. When I returned, the dialer already open on my cell. The girl was gone. I raced to the door and flung it open. I looked up and down the street for her, but saw no one. Eaten alive with worry, but not knowing what to do. I barely slept that night. The next day, as Olivia was eating yogurt melts in her booster seat, I searched in the living room for a book that I had not yet pawed through in order to get my mind off the mysterious teenage girl. En route to the bookshelf, I paused in front of the couch. There, where the girl had sat, were what resembled bloodstains in 4 different places. 2 were on the cushions that you sat on, and the others were painted on the top cushions. The sight knocked the wind out of me as I wondered, had she been bleeding? And how had I not noticed that she was bleeding if she was? Why hadn't she told me that she was hurt? As silly as I'd felt doing so, I felt compelled to call the police, to at least ensure this girl was safe. But the news anchor speaking on my TV halted my intentions and captured my attention. Hill Cemetery, the teenage girl was found dead at approximately 10 this morning by the groundskeeper. Authorities are not releasing details of her death at this time, but did state that she appeared to have died sometime last night. My gut screamed out, "That cannot be the girl. Is that the girl from last night?" I practically threw Olivia into the car seat in my haste to leave, buckling her and slipping behind the wheel in the driver's seat. I peeled out of the driveway, narrowly missing my mailbox, and zoomed through the streets of my neighborhood, neighbors openly gawking. 15 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of the sheriff's department. I bust through the entrance, Olivia in my arms, and jogged up to the front counter. Before the officer standing there had a chance to speak, I cried out, "I want to speak to someone about the teenage girl found in the cemetery." Yes, ma'am. Come with me." I followed the deputy through the fluorescent halls of generic metal doors. He stepped outside one and knocked. "Yeah." "Lady here to see you. About the teenage girl." The door opened, revealing a squat, pudgy man with intense brown eyes. His eyes found my gaze and cooled considerably. Come in. I'm Sheriff Hughes." We shook hands. "I'm Laura Yoke." Olivia fussed as I squeezed into the dense office. I opted to stand so I could bounce her on my hip. "Please sit," he said, popping down onto his chair. "No, thank you. Oh, God. This is gonna sound so crazy, but last night..." "What time last night?" he asked, eyes averted as he scribbled in a notebook. The green digital numbers on my oven clock flashed before me. It was 10:39 to be exact. He added something to whatever it was that he was writing. Then he set the pen down, folded his arms across his chest, and gave me his full attention. This girl, a teenage girl, knocked on my door and she was crying, hysterical. I let her in and asked what was wrong, and she said that she and her friends were having a seance in the cemetery. Something spooked them, and, well, she said that she saw a ghost, I guess, and she was so terrified, more scared than I've ever seen someone in my life. I went to get myself so she could call her parents, but when I got back to the living room, she had left. I was worried about this girl, and today I noticed that these red marks were on my couch where she had been sitting. They looked like blood to me. Then I heard the news about the girl found, and he held up a hand. "Let's calm down a minute here. What was this girl wearing?" "A costume, reminded me of Little Red Riding Hood, and she had long, dark hair and pale skin." The stern man's face froze in shock in a mere fleeting second. He adjusted his collar and smiled. Okay. Sounds to me like we have us a little coincidence going on here." "Really? Oh, God, that makes me feel so much better. She doesn't match the description, then?" "I cannot say that, as this is an open investigation. But I'm going to tell you something else that I shouldn't, because I see how concerned you are. Couldn't have been the girl that was found this morning." He didn't have to say anything about the clothes the dead girl was wearing. I was positive my visitor matched the body in the graveyard, based on the expression when he described her. "Wait a second. I saw your face when I described how she looked." He dismissed my observation. "Couldn't have been her. I say this because the girl found this morning was already dead by 10:30 last night. She was dead from about 8:30. I scoffed. "How accurate is that time of death?" "Pretty damn accurate." "It's pretty damn accurate, ma'am. So there. It couldn't have been the same girl. Unless you were wrong about the time." No, I went to the clock at 10:39. I know because I looked at the clock and thought about how trick-or-treating had ended right before I went to the door. I am 100% sure of that time, okay? But what about the red stains on my couch?" He clucked his tongue and tipped his head to indicate Olivia on my hip. "Ma'am, toddlers are professional mess makers. She probably got a hold of something that you didn't even realize that she had and leaked it all over the couch. Don't you think that you would have noticed if this girl from last night was wounded? I mean, was she acting hurt?" "No," I mumbled. I even asked her that she was hurt, and she said no. "Well, there. Settled then. Nothing but a coincidence." I left there feeling a tad foolish, despite a nagging voice in my head that said that there was something wrong here. I hadn't believed Sheriff Hughes was right, but I needed so badly to trust in his argument, to have a sense of closure about these strange events, to convince myself that I was fretting over nothing. With a little time and some avoidance on my part of the news in any form, I settled back into normalcy and soon rarely thought of Halloween night. That was not until Thanksgiving. At Thanksgiving dinner, my aunt's husband, a sheriff's deputy in the neighboring county, brought up the cemetery murder after he was 3 drinks deep. You just wouldn't fucking believe that these sickos run around here in society, pretending to be fucking normal. Just turns my stomach. Like that girl that we found at, what's it called? He looked at my aunt. Park Hills? Yeah, Park Hills Cemetery. My blood turned to ice. That crazy fuck. Now, I know they kept the details out of the papers, out of respect for the girl's family, but I gotta tell you, because it is a perfect fucking example of the kind of sickos that I'm talking about. I mean, this guy, who they've never caught and probably never will, actually axed the poor girl's arms and legs. That's right, axed them, to make it look like the woman's murderers from way back when. Robbie, please. Honey, please. I'm telling a story here. Let me finish. Wait, are you talking about Tallulah James? They made it look like Tallulah James killed herself, really? Remember, we used to tell each other the story of Tallulah when we were kids, Laura? My cousin intervened, wide-eyed. I said nothing. Whatever. That fucker really took her arms and legs. They haven't been able to find him. Oh, and he bit into her neck. Robbie! Aunt Paula yelled. Paula. It's Thanksgiving. Maybe we should find something more pleasant to talk about. Besides, Laura looks as she's seen a ghost. Around the dinner table, all eyes were on me. My family's soft laughter chimed. Their faces tilted and grew hazy as I slipped out of consciousness. When I opened my eyes, my mom was leaning over me. Easy, baby. You fainted. I just wanted you to rest right here. I've got Olivia. Do you need anything? I shook my head. Robbie doesn't know when to shut the fuck up. I mean, I'd rather not hear about the gruesome murders either, especially on holidays. She sighed. I'll be back in a few to check on you. She kissed my cheek and departed. Lying on my childhood bed, the story from my youth sailed into my mind. I had always thought that it was just some fun, scary story made up by some kids with an imagination the size of life. In the dark, one of us would whisper the tale of Tallulah James, the pastor's wife who first poisoned him to death, then kidnapped a dozen children, murdered them, and axed their arms and legs off. Angry, suspicious townspeople coming to confront her found the rotting corpses of the missing children in her cellar. When they asked her what she did with the arms and legs, she smiled and replied, Why, I ate 'em, of course. Her own cousin buried an axe in her neck. I didn't make the connection because I hadn't known the teenage girl had been killed and had never contemplated whether Tallulah had been a real person. Not until Uncle Robbie spoke about the graveyard murder and that woman's murders from way back when. I turned on my side, pulling my knees into my chest. Tallulah James had come from one last child. And that child, neither she nor I knowing that she was already dead, paid me a visit on her final Halloween night.
I had just moved to my current flat in Rains Park, southwest London, and was still fairly unfamiliar with the area. Now, my current bosses and supervisors know that I'm still struggling with the unreliable Southwest trains, which affected my punctuality at work. I had hoped to avoid this issue by purchasing a bicycle. Unfortunately, London's weather and my inherent laziness often conspire to force me back onto the trains. While some people are aware that the trains make me late for work, not many know about the troubles I face on my way home. Specifically, I found myself stuck at Clapham Junction, with no train to take me back to Rains Park on many occasions. In these situations, I have to take a bus to Wimbledon Common and walk the remaining 3 miles on foot. It's actually a pleasant walk, as London doesn't have many hills. If I follow the Ridgeway, I can occasionally enjoy a nice view. True, it's a view of Croydon, but a nice one nonetheless. Calling Wimbledon Village a privileged area would be an understatement. Driveways are filled with sports cars and luxury utility vehicles. Consequentially, my walks home are uneventful. I rarely encounter anyone, except for the occasional older couple or a person walking their dog. The neighborhood is quiet and goes to bed early. And that night started like any other. I got off the bus at the War Memorial, walked through the village center, and turned onto the Ridgeway. Unfortunately, my phone's battery had died somewhere between Wandsworth and Southfields, leaving me without music, which always made the walk seem longer. My usual practice was to walk along and guess what kind of people lived in the houses based on their cars and yard toys, fast cars for business types, SUVs with toys for larger families, and so on. I decided to have a cigarette and stopped to look for my lighter while glancing around. It was then that I noticed I wasn't the only person on the street, which was unusual but not alarming. What was strange, however, was that the person was unlike anyone I had grown accustomed to seeing. It was a young lady who appeared to be either drunk or tired. I lit my cigarettes and paused briefly, considering whether she needed assistance or someone to call for help. I soon realized that she was crying. I began to approach her to see if she was okay. She abruptly stopped walking and stared at me. In a city as large as London, we generally avoid making eye contact with strangers, so her behavior struck me as odd. I began to suspect she might be under the influence of something other than alcohol, and became more cautious. I stopped about 4 or 5 feet away and spoke to her. "Are you okay? You seem upset. Do you need help or someone to call for you?" She remained silent and continued to stare at me. I tried a different approach. "Have you had too much to drink or something? Do you need a taxi home? Can you remember where you live?" At this point, the girl began crying again, but this time she was wailing uncontrollably. Her raw sense of despair was palpable, and I flinched at the sound. I wanted to confront and assist her, but all I managed to say was, "Why are you crying?" She must have heard me somehow, because she started to regain composure. Still sobbing, she brought her eyes up to mine and said softly, "Because you are going to die." I've witnessed death firsthand on several occasions, so I had come to terms with my own mortality early in life. I thought perhaps this young lady had experienced a recent loss and was grappling with existential thoughts. I wanted to assure her that everything would be fine and that death was a natural part of life. However, all I managed to say was, I know." At this, she seemed taken aback, almost angry, and replied, "You are going to die, and he is going to kill you." Alarms went off in my head, and I began to feel threatened. I decided that talking her down from whatever state she was in was no longer my responsibility. Hunter S. Thompson's warnings about the unpredictability of drugs crossed my mind. "Good luck," I said, and turned to walk away. After about 5 steps, I quickly glanced back and saw her still standing there. She put her head down and started sobbing audibly again. I increased my pace and soon turned a bend in the road, leaving her out of sight. I felt agitated as I continued my walk home. I attempted to listen to music on my phone, only to remember it was out of power. Despite being 2 miles from home, I was confident that I could cover the distance in less than 20 minutes at my current pace. Less than 2 minutes later, I heard shouting, a man's voice filled with malice and rage. "I am coming for you," he yelled. I couldn't pinpoint where the voice was coming from, but it seemed to be behind me on the same road, possibly where the girl had been. I realized that I might be the target of a Halloween prank, but I refused to play along and didn't slow down. the voice yelled again, closer this time.
I hate you.
The voice seems to come from very close behind me, and I expected to see the person addressing me. But I was still alone on the street, and I hadn't heard any other footsteps. It was evidence that there were more than one prankster, and they were hiding at different points along the street. I decided to cut off the main road and turn onto Thornton Road near the Swan pub, admitting that their practical joke had rattled me, and I didn't want to see what they had planned next. As I reached the front of the second house on the street, the terrible voice shouted at me again.
You're going to die.
This time it seems to come from the entrance of the street, less than 80 feet away. It was possibly their last attempt to scare me before I disappeared into the darker side streets. Since these streets were darker, I had no qualms about starting to jog downhill. I knew it was likely all a prank, but the intensity of the shouting left me worried that I could be dealing with a real maniac. I didn't want to meet the person or people capable of mimicking such malevolent feelings at will. I reached the curve where Thornton Road turned into Thornton Road when suddenly,
I will kill you.
This time, the voice seemed to come directly from my right, possibly hidden behind a fence or within a house. I had unwittingly walked into their trap. In a panic, I broke into a sprint, pride be damned, and ran as fast as I could downhill. At this point, I was truly panicked. It felt as though the voice was all around me, constantly yelling and screaming. Up ahead, I could see Warple Road, well lit and busy, or I could hail a cab and be home in 5 minutes. But the voices continued, and the adrenaline heightened my senses. I admit I was scared, and it felt as though that terrible voice was echoing from every surface in the street. I seemed to be simultaneously running away from and into that mad rage. The words felt like hot gusts of venomous anger. I couldn't take it anymore. The voice seemed to infect me with that same intense anger. I wondered, am I the one shouting? It felt like both a victim and a perpetrator. I wanted to confront the people behind this madness and was overwhelmed with hatred.
Time to die, coward. I hate you.
I decided I had to give up. In one quick moment, I decided to stop running and have a cigarette while waiting for these people to reveal themselves. I needed answers and a smoke. I abruptly halted my run and turned around. A car beeped as it raced past exactly where I would have been if I hadn't stopped at that precise moment. Its air disturbed the back of my hair as it sped past. In my blind panic, I had run onto the road, narrowly avoiding a collision. I looked back up the road from where I had come, but there was darkness and silence. Whoever had been there had vanished. I lit my cigarette and took a few moments to calm down. Smoking had saved my life that day. Afterward, I went home, and nothing else happened to me. However, as I stood there trying to calm down, working through the panic and adrenaline, I thought I heard a soft whisper, perhaps just my imagination. It sounded like a girl's voice, softly saying, "Not such a coward after all."